He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Before I dig in, and I'm going to dig in, our folks over at Levin TV put together, at my request, a montage. Now, this montage could have gone on much longer, but it is a montage of the magnificent media reports about yours truly. It's actually hilarious, because they've been caught and they're stuck. Because now they're afraid there aren't going to be any connections whatsoever to the so-called Russian scandal involving Trump World. Having made every insinuation possible, particularly this New York Times February 14 article, which I may or may not read in hour 3, depending on where we are. It's just incredible. They do hit job after hit job, leaving the belief through their propaganda that something terribly untoward has taken place with respect to Trump World. And there's nothing. Nothing. And I speak as somebody who despises Putin and considers Russia, at least for now under Putin, our enemy. And I even consider Trump's I don't even know what to call it. His passivity, or worse, towards Putin to be rather bizarre. But so what? And you gotta love the way the reports go now. Now it's all passivity. Well, there were intercepts, and they happened to catch, a few people. But there was an awful lot of them talking to the Russian intelligence people. An awful lot of them talking to the Russian ambassador. Now, we're not saying there's anything wrong. As a matter of fact, we're saying we haven't found anything yet. And we have the FISA court reports, separate and apart from BBC, The Guardian. I don't trust them. Oh, okay. New York Times changing its headline on January 19th to January 20th from intercept to wiretap. But we're not talking about wiretapping Trump Tower. I never said Trump Tower was wiretapped. The Associated Press today. I sent an email to the reporter. Said I never said that Barack Obama had Donald Trump's phones tapped. I want a correction. All right, but in any event, here's the little montage I put together, or my folks put together for you. Go ahead.
White House officials say that the president's sources were various conservative outlets, most prominently perhaps radio host Mark Levin, who seemed to take 3 basic chunks of information and combine them into one conspiracy theory of what he calls a silent coup.
And on the conservative Breitbart website, which Friday highlighted a conspiracy-loving radio talk show host, Mark Levin.
Now, the story asserted that Obama has been trying to undermine Trump at every turn. As you can see from the headline, it was inspired by a Thursday night radio segment by conservative talk show host Mark Levin.
Apparently, this idea came from right-wing radio host and unlicensed gynecologist Mark Levin, who ranted about these wiretaps on his radio.
Hold on. It's a funny line. I think I've used that at some point, haven't I, Mr. Producer? A line like that years ago? Anyway, go ahead.
Written up by Breitbart as Mark Levin to Congress investigate Obama's silent coup versus Trump.
What does the White House gain by the President of by Steve Bannon most likely handing the President of the United States a Breitbart article and talking about what a rabid right-wing talk show host has been theorizing?
Start with firebrand conservative radio host Mark Levin. Briefly, for people who don't know, who is he?
He's got quite a following, and he's not just a conservative figure, but often espousing relatively radical positions about the need to reinvent the Constitution and the government and ways in which we think about society.
The notion that Mark Levin is a news outlet. It's not the New York Times. It's not the Washington Post. It's not the Wall Street Journal. It's not the L.A. Times. It's not a major news network. It's Mark Levin, a guy who, I know what talk radio guys do, on left and right, mostly on right. They rile people up with outrageous charges, and nobody keeps count of them. But here's the President of the United States getting his information from these people.
Evidence for suggesting President Obama has committed a crime seems pretty thin.
The detailed speculation from a conspiracy-loving talk show host, Mark Levin.
Okay. I think we can now officially declare that Trump has a worse media diet than the son of Sam Killer. And he got all his news from a talking dog who told him to murder.
It is pretty interesting, isn't it? Pretty funny, actually. Well, we will keep an eye on this. We will keep an eye on the reports. We will keep an eye on what Congress comes up with. They have completely pivoted, ladies and gentlemen, having insinuated deep, dark connections with very sleazy writing. And we can go through that. As a matter of fact, I'm working on it. We'll go through it one day. Very sleazy tactics. Really Alinsky-like tactics. And it's inbred in them. Not all of them, but too many of them. It's their conspiracy. It's the Democrat conspiracy. It's the demand for special prosecutors. It's the claim about this dossier and Trump and all those disgusting allegations in there. That's the media. I just went through their charges. And I asked a lot of questions. And the Associated Press has done it again today. They cannot help themselves. And I sent an email to the reporter, and I said, "You're going to correct this?" And assuming I have his right email address, he has not replied. All right, let's get into this. Let's get into what's going on Capitol Hill. I have a question for you. Have you heard the line, "We can only do so much to the budget reconciliation process"? This is Washington speak. This is the budget reconciliation process. They agreed some time ago. It may have been the Budget Act of 1974, but whenever it is, it doesn't matter. That when it comes to getting a budget done and reconciling the differences between the House and the Senate bills and so forth, that would be immune from the filibuster rule in the Senate. It's called the budget reconciliation process. I don't pretend to be an expert, but I do know this. I know how the Constitution works. When Paul Ryan was on here many years ago, maybe we'll pull this up for next week, Mr. Producer. When he was on here many years ago, he said to me about 85% of Obamacare could be repealed through the budget reconciliation process. I have repeated that time and time and time again. 85%, that's a big deal. We'll take it, right? Now, apparently, big chunks of it cannot be. So somebody's changed their opinions. Somebody's changed their opinions, despite the fact the Supreme Court in King versus Burwell, as my buddy Chip Roy writes in the Federalist, the court ruled about the intertwining, essentially, of these regulations and that they're inseparable from the rest of the law. Now, these regulations, these are the killers. These are the cost drivers. These regulations. And their budgetary impact is significant. So to say that these regulations do not come within the budget reconciliation process is absurd. Now, who decides if they come within the budget reconciliation process or not? Who decides? The parliamentarian of the Senate. I'm going to read this to you. It's a piece at the Federalist website by my buddy Chip Roy. Chip Roy worked for Governor Perry for a period of time. He worked for Senator Ted Cruz as chief of staff for a period of time. He's an extraordinarily bright man and a friend of mine. And here's what he says. I like the Senate parliamentarian very much and consider her a friend from my time in the Senate. I prayed for her when she had a family loss. She prayed for me when I was sick with cancer. She's a good public servant. But she's neither elected nor the final word on the future of health care for Americans. What she offers is her view on the Senate rules. At the end of the day, the Senate decides the Senate rules. Let me repeat that. The Senate decides the Senate rules. In this instance, both the parliamentarian and the Senate can and should find that full repeal of Obamacare through the budget reconciliation process, and thus 51 votes, is permissible. Republican leadership has long been saying that if full repeal is sent from the House to the Senate, it will be deemed to violate Senate rules under budget reconciliation. They claim this is because the insurance regulations and mandates are merely incidental to the budgetary impact of Obamacare, and therefore would draw a budget point of order requiring 60 votes to fully repeal the law's insurance regulations and mandates. This is false. Obamacare's onerous insurance regulations and mandates are the primary drivers of individuals and families' rising premiums and deductibles. They are the very backbone of Obamacare's oppressive centralization of health care. The regulations and mandates are crippling the health insurance market, driving up costs for patients, doctors, and insurers, and degrading the quality of care that patients are receiving. To argue that their budgetary impact is merely incidental to the rest of the law is absurd on its face. Even the Obama administration made this very argument before the Supreme Court in the case of King versus Burwell, arguing forcibly that the regulations are inseparable from the rest of the law. Predicated on that alone, Congress has a case that full repeal through budget reconciliation is viable. Yet, neither the House nor the Senate have even attempted to pass a full repeal of the law through reconciliation. Let me repeat that. They won't even attempt it. The Senate parliamentarian hasn't even adjudicated whether she believes a full repeal is allowed under reconciliation rules. After 8 years of promising to fully repeal Obamacare, Congress has not even tried to do so in a process requiring just 51 votes in the Senate. Also, should the parliamentarian present an unfavorable ruling, the Senate has the power, as Senator Ted Cruz articulated, to put Vice President Mike Pence in the chair and overrule the parliamentarian. The Senate decides the Senate rules. Congress has promised to fully repeal this catastrophic law for nearly 8 years. Now that they control all levers of power, they're hiding behind excuses and procedural theory to avoid making good on their promises. Congressional leaders are putting the hypothetical opinion of an unelected Senate employee above the promises they made to the American people about the preservation of America's crumbling health care system and above the quality of their constituents' health care, all as an excuse to avoid taking a consequential vote and doing the right thing for all Americans. They are out of excuses to finally make good on their promise to fully repeal the catastrophic Obamacare. And the American people are out of patience. So let's recap this so even the New York Times can comprehend it. Even the Associated Press, what's the guy's name? Jonathan Lemire, or Lemire, L-E-M-I-R-E. Try and take down my words accurately if you're going to repeat them, Mr. Reporter. And it's this. Number one, we don't even know what the parliamentarian is actually going to do because nobody's presented it to her in the form of an actual bill yet. Number two, how can it be that cost-driving regulations, the heart and soul of of what is destroying the financial heart of this Obamacare, is considered other than budgetary? Number three, in the end, it's the Senate that makes the Senate rules, not a parliamentarian. It's the Senate. And the vice president sitting in the chair. Now, I'll add a number four. There's nothing in the Constitution that creates a filibuster rule. As a matter of fact, early on in the Senate, there was no filibuster rule. They adopted it somewhat later, and it looks nothing today like it did back then. And they've adjusted the filibuster rule in the past. Harry Reid himself and the Democrats, as you know, through the so-called nuclear option, called the Reid option, they blocked the filibuster rule, the use of the filibuster, when it came to appointees within the Obama administration, as well as the lower courts, the district and the circuit courts. They let it stand when it comes to the Supreme Court. So the filibuster rule has been adjusted. It has not always existed. And it seems to me the Constitution comes first. So why wouldn't the Republicans want to try this? I'll tell you why. I'm convinced there are so many moderates and liberals among them who want these major aspects of Obamacare to stay. Whether it's kids, young adults, I should say, staying on their parents' insurance to the age of 26, or the massive expansion of Medicaid, which a majority of the governors have embraced, or whatever it is. They don't want to abolish those things. So here's what I think. I don't think they have 51 votes in the Senate to repeal Obamacare. I don't think all the Republicans in the Senate would vote to repeal Obamacare. So they keep bringing up this parliamentarian and the filibuster rule, the 60 votes, so as not to expose the Susan Collinses and the Lisa Murkowskis and the rest of them, who in fact would not vote to abolish Obamacare. I think that's what's going on. We have a relative handful of more liberal members of the Republican caucus, if you will, who are gumming up the entire works. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
I want to read you something. It's from a newspaper, so I can't verify it. But a good newspaper, the Washington Examiner, David Drucker. Just reading what's here. President Trump has told Republican leaders that he's prepared to play hardball with congressional conservatives to pass the Republican health care bill, including by supporting the 2018 primary challengers of any Republican who votes against the bill. Sources, I want the Associated Press to pay attention. I'm reading a news article. I didn't write it. Sources told the Washington Examiner that Trump made that threat in a White House meeting on Tuesday with House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, he's a loathsome person, and other members of the House GOP whip team that helps line up votes. One of the people they're looking at, according to this report, is a wonderful, wonderful member of Congress, Mark Meadows, chairman of the Freedom Caucus. I will be right back. I'd like to hear your opinion on this, if it's true. In the Washington Examiner, President Trump told Republican leaders he's prepared to play hardball with congressional conservatives to pass the GOP health care bill, including by supporting the 2018 primary challengers of any Republican who votes against the bill. Sources told the Washington Examiner that Trump made that threat in a White House meeting on Tuesday with House Majority Whip Steve Scalise and other members of the House GOP whip team that helps line up votes. Again, I'm reading from the newspaper. Trump's threat is one that could resonate. Most of the Republicans who oppose the GOP's American Health Care Act represent ruby red districts that strongly support Trump and his agenda. Therefore, they could be the most susceptible to a midterm primary challenge, especially if Trump tells those voters that their member of Congress is blocking him from fulfilling his promise to repeal President Obama's health care law. I'm stunned by this, if this is accurate. The conservatives always come under attack, whether it's John Boehner and the Rhino wing of the party, now Trump, if this is true. The establishment is now wrapping Trump around their proposal. And for Trump, more than a philosophical matter, of course, it is a personal matter. If he wants something done, he wants something done. The president will respond as circumstances dictate, a House Republican said today, on condition of anonymity in order to discuss internal strategy. He has unique capacities. I wouldn't want to be the one he tests them out on. See, so now the establishment Republicans, the big government Republicans, feel they have an ally. What's that all about? If negotiations don't reach fruition, is the bill ready for a floor vote? Republican insiders said, watch Trump's tweets and travel schedule for signs that he's dispensed with the carrots and brought out the stick to try to get wayward members on board. Party insiders, oh, what happened to the outsiders, say the president at that point could choose to make an example of one of two resistant Republicans to send a message. Do you like these mobster tactics, ladies and gentlemen? If true. Representative Mark Meadows, chairman of the Freedom Caucus. This sounds like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce doing this stuff. The primary group of House Republicans opposed to the health care bill is a possible target. So now the establishment Republicans are leaking this stuff. And I'm hopeful that President Trump will come out and say, no, I reject such efforts. His Western North Carolina district voted overwhelmingly for Trump in November, and Meadows has come out in opposition to the bill. Meadows was still opposed this week, but seems to recognize that it would be difficult to win an argument with the president at home. Quote, the president has a very powerful bully pulpit and a very powerful tweet, and so I would never want to take on the president in either of those realms, he admitted. Trump so far has deployed the carrot in a bid to persuade the opposition to his side. Representative Tom Cole, Oklahoma, a member of the House Deputy Whip team, said that might be enough. Now, Cole is a liberal. Are you concerned about the sides that are developing here, ladies and gentlemen? Are you concerned about the tactics? I'm particularly interested in people who were for Trump from day one. What do you think about this? I don't think he has to threaten them, says Cole. I think he does have to persuade them and make them realize we fail at this. The first victims are going to be you guys because you're the ones up in 2018. People have to decide, do you really want to hand the president a defeat on his first major initiative? I think that's full of political consequences for people that do it. I want to congratulate Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise and Reince Priebus and the RNC and all the rest of them. You've really attempted to box everybody in here. I just hope President Trump knows better. And the pom-pom boys in the media and the Rockettes in the media, I hope they know better before they run off for their spaghetti meal tonight. Trump continues to negotiate with opposition conservatives to improve the bill and gain their support, although the administration and Republican leaders are ruling out many of the major changes critics are demanding. Trump has held listening sessions with conservative advocacy groups that oppose the bill and tried publicly to encourage Rand Paul to drop his opposition. He's also dispatching Vice President Mike Pence to Louisville on Saturday for a rally with Governor Matt Bevin to drum up support. Trump's first road trip to sell the health care bill is scheduled for next week in Nashville. Now listen to this. Paul Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, and this guy Steve Scalise, and their enforcers. Quote, the whip team was expected to present Trump with a list of Republicans that need convincing on Tuesday. That's when they're next scheduled to meet at the White House on what is to become a weekly check-in session until the House passes health care reform. The White House said today in an email exchange the president is heavily engaged in trying to forge consensus and push the bill through Congress. Conservative critics of the health care bill are dismissing it as Obamacare light. They say it doesn't go far enough in unwinding the Affordable Care Act or implementing free market reforms that would reduce premiums and improve access to quality care. And many are asking for a clear repeal bill and then a fresh debate on its replacement. But for Trump, that's simply a non-starter. Republican leaders on Capitol Hill and the Trump administration say the GOP faces a binary choice. Pass this proposal, possibly with some minor alterations, and fulfill this year's long promises to repeal and replace Obamacare, or let the opportunity pass and bear responsibility for a failing to fix health care. You believe this? With all its horrible parts, a massive new entitlement for the states from the federal government, Medicaid. But don't worry, in 2020 we will stop subsidizing the states. No, you won't. No, you won't. When's the last time that happened? When's the first time that's happened? So it is possible that what you're watching with the Republican control of Washington, D.C. is the most, well, let me put it to you this way, the biggest spenders in world history. If we have $1 trillion infrastructure bill, if we have Ivanka's family leave paid for, a brand new entitlement, if we don't reform Social Security and Medicare 20, 30, 40 years out, we've essentially nationalized the student loan system. That's over $1 trillion. Interest rates are starting to go up. We're going to be paying much higher interest on a massive debt. And under Rhino Care, repeal in name only, the spending, the prolific spending, goes on and on and on. I tell you, it's concerning. Now, I understand. If I had pom-poms or I'm part of the Rockettes, none of this would be a problem. I'd just be in the cheerleader mode. And you know which talk show hosts do that on TV and radio. Philip, Savannah, Georgia, the great WTKS. Go.
Hey, Mark. Thank you so much for taking my call. It's an honor to speak with you.
Thank you.
I'm 25 years old. I've got a beautiful young daughter, and I've got another one on the way. And this debt mountain that's about to pour down on the United States of America is going to pour down on me and my children. And stuff like this is what really scares me, Mark. Having guys with R's next to their name isn't good enough to make me sleep well at night, whether it be the president or the House or the Senate. I've really tried to get engaged and learn from guys like you about how to get involved and fix our country, because we got to continue what the Tea Party started back in 2010. Just getting a guy with an R next to his name isn't going to get the job done, and I think we're seeing it.
Well, let me slow you down. What do you think about targeting conservatives? They're calling them naysayers. They're not even calling them conservatives. What do you think about targeting conservatives who are saying, wait a minute, let's repeal this thing, but we need to have a further talk about what we're going to replace this with, because this replacement doesn't cut it. So we're supposed to target these people now and defeat them in the Republican primary process?
I think we need to do what the Tea Party did to guys like those, and we need to primary them and get them out. But the conservatives have to wake up, and you can't be sleeping good at night just because we got a Republican majority. It's not good enough.
I think conservatives have awakened. What I'm saying to you is they're being targeted now by the Republican leadership in the White House, according to this article, if it's accurate. I don't know. I'm not tapping into the phones over there at the White House. I can't be sure, you know.
It must be nice to have conservative representatives somewhere. I'm from South Georgia, sir, and we don't really have much conservatives lending a lot of help. We don't have many Ted Cruz's or Mike Lees in there fighting the fight.
No, you don't. All right, sir, thank you for your call. Let's continue. Jerry, Passaic, New Jersey, the great WABC. Go.
I am so disgusted. I was originally for Cruz and Walker. I held my nose and I voted for him. But what scares me now, that he's taking the side of the big spenders, whether he realizes it or not. If he's successful, he's a one-term president, and B, he's in jeopardy of losing both the House and the Congress with this nonsense. But I think the people are smarter than that. I think we're going to knock out some more rhinos.
Well, I don't know about that. The rhinos are targeting conservatives, according to this report in the Washington Examiner. He's going to... I mean, think about this. Scalise and Ryan and McCarthy and they're going to hand a list of conservative Republicans to Donald Trump to target. I want you to think about that. According to this article. All right, he's gone. Well, I thought about that. What do you think about that? Ken, Long Island, New York, the great WABC. Go.
Hey, Mark, it's an absolute pleasure to speak with you. You know, we actually met at the Huntington Book Review, I don't know, a couple of summers ago. I was the guy that bought 12 copies of Plunder and Deceit.
Wow, that was unbelievable. I was wondering.
You called me your accountant. I even bought my own copy of the Liberty Amendments. I must have given away 40 Liberty Amendments. You just can't get over on enough folks to wake them up. I've given my kids subscriptions to CRTV. They haven't activated them yet.
You're good.
We're trying.
All right, what up?
It's unfortunate that there's always targeting of conservatives. And I see some articles that Trump and the administration were willing to work with them to amend and fix the bill. We can only hope. I have my own theory, a little different than yours. We don't have rhinos. We have Democrat plants. Different. The Democrats are so much more strategic. They've been at this. They're always lockstep.
But you can't believe that Paul Ryan is a Democrat plant for all these years. He came out of Empower America. All these other things.
The ultimate brilliance. But they always say, look, you're really with us, but you make a little noise and you go along. And that's why they funded everything that Obama ever wanted. They always make a little noise, but
When is the last time the Republican leadership or Republican president targeted liberal or moderate Republicans in primaries for defeat? Can you think of any?
Can't ever think of it.
Neither can I.
There's one other thing I want to give you. I'm sick of hearing that 20 million people could lose their coverage under Obamacare. That number is as real as the unemployment statistic. I actually found an article because I have a small business, and I remember when they canceled the 6 million policies for individuals, they canceled ours, and I'm a small business. So it turned we were a group plan, 21 lives. So it turns out I found an article on the Washington Post of all places ran January 11, 2014, saying that up to 40 million small business employees could lose their coverage as substandard under Obamacare, just like it happened to mine. And that's on top of the 6 million. And they even said in the article that New Jersey had already sent out 650,000 letters to small business employees. You do the math.
I'm up against the hard break. I apologize. I got it. Hope to see you again soon. And you will, I believe. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
I want to talk to you about Hillsdale College and its relevance to your life and your beliefs. As you and I know, certain things are just not debatable, like the fact that there's a creator, and that he created all of us with the right to life, to liberty, and the priceless right to pursue our own happiness. But the sad reality is that most modern Americans have never had any real teaching in these beautiful truths. Hillsdale College shows us how critical liberty is in every aspect of our lives. There are very few institutions in America that dedicate their entire existence to helping us think through these things. The schools don't. Some churches don't. The mass media certainly do not. Hillsdale offers the free online courses you hear me talk about, free regional lectures across the country, free publications like their monthly speech digest and Primus. Make it a point to regularly check in with levinforhillsdale.com, that's Levin for Hillsdale.com, to see how Hillsdale can help turn you into a more satisfied fighter for truth and liberty. That's levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. This was supposed to be so straightforward, this whole Obamacare thing, and now our eyes are turning up into our heads, and they're wearing us down, and we're being filled with propaganda. They're using Saul Alinsky tactics now to try and defeat fellow Republicans, and in this case, conservatives. You've got the vast majority of conservative organizations throughout this country who reject this, and it doesn't seem to matter. Let me put a question out there for you. The Republicans control the House and the Senate. Donald Trump's in the White House. The Republicans control the White House. Let me ask you a question, honestly. Whomever you voted for in the Republican primaries, so be it. What does the Republican Party stand for under Trump, Ryan, and McConnell? If they can't get this right. Kevin, Wilmington, North Carolina, the Mark Levin app. Go.
Mark, I'm 34 years old. I'm a brand new father, and let me tell you, I am livid. All right, I've been a conservative my entire life, and the nerds and the establishment are just unbelievable. And the bottom line here is that why is it always conservatives that are the ones that need to be strong-armed? It would be interesting if the Trump administration...
Well, you want me to answer your question?
Well, I mean, it's a rhetorical question.
Well, what's the answer?
Well, the answer is because they don't believe in liberty. They have their own agendas that they're working on.
The answer is because the Republican Party is not a conservative party anymore. As a matter of fact, my friend, I would go a little bit further. I would say it's only been a conservative party in certain periods of history. It's a conservative party if we look in modern times under Reagan and under Coolidge. It's just been something else most of the time, hasn't it?
I couldn't agree with you more. But let me say this. You know, the Trump administration, it would be interesting if they might conduct their own little poll and take the pulse of the American people. You know, this bill that the Republicans are putting forward, it benefits mostly, it's aimed to benefit and pacify most people that voted for Hillary Clinton. If Trump asked the question...
That's a very good point.
If Trump asked the question to all the people that voted for him, what's more important to you, whether the Obamacare gets repealed or whether it gets replaced with what they're putting forward? I guarantee you 90% of his voters are going to say, we just want this thing gone. You know, you told us after Obamacare was passed, I remember listening to your show back then, you said, write down to yourself how this feels so that you remember when you go to the polls to vote. Remember how it feels when they slam this through against our will. And let me tell you something. We all went to the polls. We voted in a Republican Congress. We voted in a Republican Senate. And by God, we voted in kind of a Republican president. And now I'm starting to feel the same way I did back when Obamacare got shoved down our throats. These nerds in the establishment are doing the same thing.
All right, Kevin, we appreciate your call. Well, we really are stuck. We don't want the hardcore leftists to get elected. But the Republican Party is basically the anti-Democrat party. It is not a conservative party.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. I want to read something to you. How long ago would this have been? February 14th. What's that, about a month ago? Almost a month. From the New York Times. Michael Schmidt, Mark Mazzetti, Matt Apuzzo. Just want to read this to you. And when I'm going to read it to you, then I want you to call me and tell me what you think of this. Okay? Mr. Call Screener, clear out the calls if you don't mind. Let's get a clean slate. No offense. Here's the title of the story. Trump campaign aides had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence. That's quite a title. Phone records and intercepted calls show that members of Donald J. Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and other Trump associates had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials in the year before the election, according to 4 current and former American officials. So your antenna go up, right? American law enforcement and intelligence agencies intercepted the communications around the same time they were discovering evidence that Russia was trying to disrupt the presidential election by hacking into the Democrat National Committee, 3 of the officials said. So, the reporters tie this together. Phone records and intercepted calls show that members of Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and other Trump associates had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials in the year before the election. American law enforcement intelligence agencies intercepted the communications around the same time they were discovering evidence that Russia was trying to disrupt the presidential election by hacking into the Democrat National Committee, 3 of the officials said. Now, why would they pretend to link the two? The intelligence agencies then sought to learn whether the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians on the hacking or other efforts to influence the election. Now, this is in paragraph 2. Next sentence. The officials interviewed in recent weeks said that so far they had seen no evidence of such cooperation. Then why continue writing the story? Because they want to flop this stuff out there. But the intercepts alarmed American intelligence and law enforcement agencies, in part because of the amount of contact that was occurring while Mr. Trump was speaking glowingly about the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. At one point last summer, Mr. Trump said at a campaign event that he hoped Russian intelligence services had stolen Hillary Clinton's emails and would make them public. Keep listening. The officials said the intercepted communications were not limited to Trump campaign officials and included other associates of Mr. Trump. On the Russian side, not limited to campaign officials and other associates of Mr. Trump's. On the Russian side, so right now we have unnamed, anonymous sources very concerned about all these contacts, concerned about them at the same time of the hacking of the DNC, although they've seen no evidence of any cooperation. Pretty sleazy reporting, don't you think? Such as it is. The officials said the intercepted communications were not limited to Trump campaign officials and included other associates of Mr. Trump. So now you're thinking, wow, it's widening. It's not just campaign officials, it's other associates. On the Russian side, the contacts also included members of the government outside of intelligence agencies, they said. All the current and former officials spoke on the condition of anonymity because the continuing investigation is classified. So why are they leaking? The officials said that one of the advisors picked up on the calls was Paul Manafort, who was Mr. Trump's campaign manager for several months last year and had worked as a political consultant in the Ukraine. The officials declined to identify the other Trump associates on the calls. So they're intercepting calls, one way or another, somehow, aimed at the Russians. They're picking up these calls. I'm just interpreting. Manafort's one of them, they say. There's other Trump associates. You're going, holy mackerel, what the hell's going on here? The call logs and intercepted communications are part of a larger trove of information that the FBI is sifting through as it investigates the links between Mr. Trump's associates and the Russian government, as well as the hacking of the DNC, according to federal law enforcement officials. Does that not sound like to you? I don't care how they get the intercepts. Does that not sound like to you that Trump associates are under investigation? Well, what do you call this if you don't call that? Just sort of passive reading time? I don't know what you call it otherwise. As part of its inquiry, the FBI has obtained banking and travel records and conducted interviews, the officials said. Banking and travel records of whom? And conducted interviews with whom? You see how they're creating these insinuations? You see how the cloud is getting darker and darker and hanging over Trump? Mr. Manafort, who's not been charged with any crimes, dismissed officials' accounts in a telephone interview. This is absurd, he said. I have no idea what this is referring to. I have never knowingly spoken to Russian intelligence officers, and I've never been involved with anything to do with the Russian government or the Putin administration or any other issues under investigation today. He added, it's not like these people wear badges that say I'm a Russian intelligence officer. They go on. Several of Mr. Trump's associates, like Mr. Manafort, have done business in Russia. You see the strings that are being pulled? And it's not unusual, no. Don't worry, though. It's not unusual for American businessmen to come in contact with foreign intelligence officials, sometimes unwittingly, in countries like Russia and Ukraine, where the spy services are deeply embedded in society. So why write any of this if it's not unusual? Law enforcement officials did not say to what extent the context might have been about business. Again, another insinuation. Okay, well, what might else they have been about? I don't know. They just leave it there. It's a hanging. And hanging Chad. Let's go on. The officials would not disclose many details, including what was discussed on the calls, the identity of the Russian intelligence officials who participated, and how many of Mr. Trump's advisors were talking to the Russians. It is also unclear whether the conversations had anything to do with Mr. Trump himself. So what's the point? And what's with the leaks? A report from American intelligence agencies that was made public in January concluded that the Russian government had intervened in the election in part to help Mr. Trump, but did not address whether any members of the Trump campaign had participated in the effort. Meaning there's a question mark, I guess. This is really connivance. That's what this is. By this newspaper. Let's go on. The intercepted calls are different from the wiretap conversations last year between Michael T. Flynn, Mr. Trump's former national security advisor, and Sergei I. Kistyak, Russia's ambassador to the United States. In those calls, which led to Mr. Flynn's resignation, the two men discussed sanctions that the Obama administration imposed on Russia in December. But the cases are part of an American intelligence and law enforcement agency's routine electronic surveillance of the communications of foreign officials. The FBI declined to comment. The White House also declined to comment. But earlier in the day, they talk about Press Secretary Sean Spicer stood by Trump's previous comments that nobody from his campaign had contact with Russian officials before the election. You see? Oh, they must be lying about something. They're covering up something. But they're really not, you see, because they haven't found anything yet. Now, I've gotten printed pages almost through 2 pages of this. This is a smear job with innuendo and supposition and the commingling of information with selective leaks. It goes on. 2 days after the election in November, Sergei Rabkov, the deputy Russian foreign minister, said, quote, there were contacts during the campaign between Russian officials and Mr. Trump's team. Obviously, we know most of the people from his entourage, he said. He told Russia's Interfax news agency. The Trump transition team denied his statement. Quote, this is not accurate, Hope Hicks, a spokeswoman for Mr. Trump, said at the time. The National Security Agency, NSA, which monitors the communications of foreign intelligence services, initially captured the calls between Mr. Trump's associates and the Russians as part of routine foreign surveillance. After that, the FBI asked the NSA to collect as much information as possible about the Russian operatives on the phone calls and to search through troves of previous intercepted communications that had not been analyzed. The FBI has closely examined at least 3 other people close to Mr. Trump, although it's unclear if their calls were intercepted. They are Carter Page, a businessman and former foreign policy advisor to the campaign, Roger Stone, a longtime Republican operative, and Mr. Flynn. All the men have strongly denied that they had any improper contacts with Russian officials. So they have to keep proving a negative. We strongly deny it. I don't have any idea if this guy's an intelligence guy. This is all nonsense. Come on, can you prove it? Can you prove it? Can I prove what? As part of the inquiry, the FBI is also trying to assess the credibility of information contained in a dossier that was given to the Bureau last year by a former British intelligence operative. Remember, BuzzFeed put this out? CNN went with big chunks of this. Remember all that? The dossier contained a raft of allegations of a broad conspiracy between Mr. Trump his associates, and the Russian government. So why are they regurgitating this? Is this news? It also included unsubstantiated claims that the Russians had embarrassing videos that could be used to blackmail Mr. Trump. This is how they get this stuff in their story. Unsubstantiated claims. But they put it in the story because they treat the dossier as a story. The FBI had spent several months investigating the leads in the dossier, but has yet to confirm any of its most explosive claims. So far, I'm 3/4 through the story, almost done, and they haven't substantiated anything. Senior FBI officials believe that the former British intelligence officer who compiled the dossier, Christopher Steele, has a credible track record, and he briefed investigators last year about how he obtained the information. One American law enforcement official said the FBI agents had made contact with some of Mr. Steele's sources. The agency's investigation. So now you have the NSA and the FBI. And according to McClatchy, 4 other intelligence/law enforcement type operations. Agencies and departments, I should say. The agency's investigation of Mr. Manafort began last spring as an outgrowth of a criminal investigation into his work for a pro-Russian political party in Ukraine and for the country's former president. It is focused on why he was in such close contact with Russia and Ukraine intelligence officials. The Bureau did not have enough evidence to obtain a warrant for a wiretap of Mr. Manafort's communications, but it had the NSA scrutinize the communications of Ukrainian officials he had met. The FBI investigation is proceeding at the same time that separate investigations into Russian interference in the election are gaining momentum on Capitol Hill. Those investigations by the House and Senate Intel committees are examining not only the Russian hacking, but also any contact that Mr. Trump's team had with Russian officials during the campaign. You see, that's the second time the insinuation is made that there's a connection. Talk about conspiracy theories. Talk about hacks. This was the February 14th New York Times. February 14th New York Times. A hit job. A smear job. The claims, in essence, of the Trump-Russia connections, and then admits they can't prove any of them. A non-story turned into a story. Circulated widely. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
There's at least 3 other news outlets that reported about a FISA warrant that was granted in October. A FISA warrant. A FISA warrant aimed at what? Whom? Manafort, Stone, Page, Russian banks that may have had business with Trump World in some fashion? A FISA warrant. Mr. Clapper goes on Meet the Depressed last Sunday and says, I don't know any wiretaps related to any FISA, warrant or something or other. Well, was there a FISA warrant for something or not? CNN's Brian Stetler, who's really not a reporter, he's a hack, but nonetheless, he says, I have got no evidence. Well, I don't have any evidence there was any FISA warrants. We can't independently verify that. And, of course, he only says that after I confront him in an email. Was there a FISA warrant or not? The media is conflicted. Not me. Not you. Did they succeed in getting a FISA warrant? Did they apply for a FISA warrant last summer? These things are not made up on talk radio. They're made up, or they're truthful, as a result of media reporting. Right? And there's 2 other very, very interesting stories from the New York Times, which is really at the epicenter of this. I don't care what the Associated Press writes and says about me. I'm telling you the facts. These are the media outlets, not me. I just read you the entire story. And their fear now is there's nothing there. For weeks and months, they've had their little talk events on CNN and MSNBC and so forth and so on. They've gotten their jollies watching the Democrats go on and on about a special prosecutor and an independent, somebody independent of the Attorney General to investigate it. They've made jokes in the liberal culture and the media and so forth about Trump and his associates and the Russians and so forth, but none of it's true. There is no collaboration about the election, at least according to the media reports. I'll be back. We have the greatest democracy in the world. We have the greatest democracy in the world, but there's one government institution with the power to print money and make decisions about interest rates, whether to raise them or drop them and so forth. And, of course, now we have a Republican president, and the Fed, after all these years of having its foot on the brake, is putting its foot on the gas. And they're going to raise interest rates, they say. Seems very, very problematic. They should have probably raised interest rates earlier, but they didn't do it. Not only that, you look at the spending spree that's going on in Washington under the Republicans. Look what they're proposing. You get very frustrated. You feel hopeless about any ability to control this. So you got to control what goes on in your own life. You got to control what you do with the hard-earned income that you have and the assets that you have. And one of the things you do is you diversify. Now, I diversify myself, and I buy gold. And gold is the only currency the Fed can't print or manipulate, quite frankly. Now, call the gold company I trust, our wonderful sponsor, Goldline, 877-365-COIN, 877-365-COIN. You can get started for as little as $100 a month. Get the free risk information and read it. And if you call now, Goldline will also give you a free Thomas Jefferson presidential coin just for calling. Call right now, 877-365-COIN, 877-365-COIN. Get the free Thomas Jefferson presidential coin. Ask them about this $100 a month program that they have. Read their risk information as well. It's always important to be informed. And seriously consider diversifying. Yes, I have gold. It's a physical asset because I want some physical assets. So check it out, 877-365-COIN. I know it's Friday evening in some places, Friday night in other places, but they're there. 877-365-COIN. Here's another New York Times article. Another New York Times article I want to read to you as well. January 12th. NSA gets more latitude to share intercepted communications. We've been over this, but I want to emphasize it. In its final days, the Obama administration has expanded the power of the National Security Agency, this is the New York Times, not me, to share globally intercepted personal communications with the government's 16 other intelligence agencies before applying privacy protections. Did you get all that? The new rules significantly relax long-standing limits on what the NSA may do with the information gathered by its most powerful surveillance operations, which are largely unregulated by American wiretapping laws. These include collecting satellite transmissions, phone calls, and emails that cross network switches abroad, and messages between people abroad that cross domestic network switches. I wonder if Congress is going to look into this. Apart from Trump, Obama, Russia, I wonder if they will. The change means that far more officials will be searching through raw data. Essentially, the government is reducing the risk that the NSA will fail to recognize that a piece of information will be valuable to another agency, but increasing the risk that officials will see private information about innocent people. Attorney General Loretta Lynch signed the new rules permitting the NSA to disseminate, quote, raw signals intelligence information, unquote, on January 3, after the director of the National Intelligence, James Clapper, signed them on December 15. according to a 23-page, largely declassified copy of the procedures. Now, this is something the article says they've been working on for some time. So why would they do this on January 3rd? That is, if it's so important to American security, why wouldn't this have been on a fast track? They've been working on it for years. But on the way out the door, they institute it. Don't ask CNN because they don't give a damn. Don't ask Chris Matthews because he's under the table about now. Don't ask Brian Ross because he's busy chasing Tea Party activists. Don't ask Joe Scarborough because he's dumb as a rock. And, of course, the Associated Press is off doing what the Associated Press does. The press. Previously, the NSA filtered information before sharing intercepted communications with another agency like the CIA or the intelligence branches of the FBI and the Drug Enforcement Administration. The NSA's analysts passed on only information they deemed pertinent, screening out the identities of innocent people and irrelevant personal information. Now, other intelligence agencies will be able to search directly through raw repositories of communications intercepted by the NSA and then apply such rules for minimizing privacy intrusions. This is not expanding the substantive ability of law enforcement to get access to signals intelligence, said Robert S. Litt, the general counsel to Mr. Clapper. It's simply widening the aperture for a large number of analysts who will be bound by the existing rules. But Patrick Toomey, a lawyer for the American Civil Liberties Union, called the move an erosion of rules intended to protect the privacy of Americans when their messages are caught by the NSA's powerful global collection methods. You know, like intercepts that are out there on the Russians and things just happen to get caught. You get the drift. He noted that domestic Internet data was often routed or stored abroad, where it may get vacuumed up without court oversight. Rather than dramatically expanding government access to so much personal data, we need much stronger rules to protect the privacy of Americans, Mr. Toomey said. 17 different government agencies shouldn't be rooting through Americans' emails with family members, friends, and colleagues, all without ever obtaining a warrant. Well, Mr. Toomey of the ACLU, you're obviously part of the right-wing kook brigades. Another right-wing kook. The NSA has been required to apply similar privacy protections to foreigners' information since early 2014, an unprecedented step that President Obama took after the disclosures of NSA documents by former intelligence contractor Edward Snowden and so forth and so on. So this change has been in the works for some time. And yet it ends on January 3rd when they institute it. They couldn't let the next administration take a look at it? That's the New York Times. Does that concern you? Independent of everything else, does that concern you? And then we have this from 9 days ago. Obama administration rushed to preserve intelligence of Russian election hacking. This isn't Breitbart. This isn't the Daily Caller. This isn't the Drudge Report. This is the New York Times. Matthew Rosenberg, Adam Goldberg, and Michael Schmidt again. Schmidt. In the Obama administration's last days, some White House officials scrambled to spread information about Russian efforts to undermine the presidential election and about possible contacts between associates of President-elect Donald J. Trump and Russians across the government. Did not they just report not long before that there was nothing to it, that they didn't find any crimes, they didn't find any collusion? And yet this, let me read it again. In the Obama administration's last days, some White House officials scrambled to spread information about Russian efforts to undermine the presidential election and about possible contacts between associates of President-elect Donald Trump and Russians across the government. Former American officials say they had two aims: to ensure that such meddling isn't duplicated in future American or European elections, and to leave a clear trail of intelligence for government investigators. For government investigators to do what? Did I not just read you from the same newspaper that they came up empty? Is the investigation of a sitting president or his entourage or his transition team or whatever it is this whatever investigation still going on? I don't mean of the Russians hacking. I'm talking about the rest of it. American allies, including the British and Dutch, have provided information describing meetings in Europe. That goes on. Mr. Trump has denied that his campaign had any contact with Russian officials, and at one point he openly suggested that American spy agencies had cooked up intelligence suggesting that the Russian government had tried to meddle in the presidential election. Mr. Trump has accused the Obama administration of hyping the Russia storyline as a way to discredit his new administration. Well, somebody sure as hell has been hyping this Russia storyline, and in part it's been the media. The media now that say, do I have proof, based on their own reports, that there was a FISA warrant? Man, oh man, do they have egg on their face. At the Obama White House, Mr. Trump's statements stoked fears among some that intelligence could be covered up or destroyed. Now talk about conspiracies by kooks, or its sources exposed once power changes hands. What followed was a push to preserve the intelligence that underscored the deep anxiety with which the White House and American intelligence agencies had come to view the threat from Moscow. The threat from Moscow, you're talking about the threat from Trump and the Trump people here. And you and I are the conspiracy theorists, ladies and gentlemen. This is astounding. It also reflected the suspicion among many in the Obama White House, that would be Obama's staffers, that the Trump campaign might have colluded with Russia on election email hacks, a suspicion that American officials say has not been confirmed. So who are the conspiracy nuts here in power, by the way? Former senior Obama administration officials said that none of the efforts were directed by Obama. And yet, even accepting that, the New York Times says Obama White House. More than once. Some White House officials scrambled to spread information about Russian efforts. Now, having read all this, and more, I came to the conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we damn well better get to the bottom of this and bring an end to this. Because this is destructive of this country. It's destructive of the sitting administration. These are police state tactics. Ask the ACLU. Ask other people. And if it's not true, what they're reporting, if what they're reporting is not true, then we have another problem. A media filled with propagandists, by omission and by actual reporting. The innuendo, the insinuations, the repetition. If the intercepts are commonplace, then why treat them as something else? If they're discussions with Russians and Trump people of one variety or another, and there's nothing to them, then why keep reporting them? And what about these last two stories? Oh, you must be a conspiracy nut. I am reading to you from the New York Times. And it's driving them nuts. I'm reading to you from the New York Times, and I'm trying to hold them to account for the things that they're writing. And it's driving them nuts. And guess what? I'm going to keep driving them nuts. I've only just begun. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
having gone through all this and more with you, we went back and we transcribed the show. And you can do the same. And I can't read you everything. I can't do a show within a show within a show. But I'm even taking this out of context, which is less beneficial to me. In the course of the entire discussion. And so the question is, I said at one point, how many of Michael Flynn's phone calls to various foreign leaders were intercepted by the Obama administration and recorded by the Obama administration? Well, we know they leaked some of it, right? Here's the next one. How many phone calls by Donald Trump, if any, had been intercepted by the Obama administration and recorded by the Obama administration? And all the other transition officials involved with foreign policy and national security and defense policy, then it goes on. I never said Barack Obama ordered wiretaps of Donald Trump's phones. I never said that Obama had wiretapped Trump Tower. Ever. And now the Associated Press, on a Friday afternoon/evening, with its massive reach in the newspapers throughout the country, throughout the world, writes a long hit piece on Donald Trump and includes these two sentences. Radio host Mark Levin. Oh, no, let's start from the beginning here. That wasn't the only time last week when Trump put the White House stamp on a theory that originated on the edges of the conservative movement. Radio host Mark Levin voiced without evidence the idea that Obama had wiretapped Trump Tower. When did I say that? That accusation was picked up the next day by Breitbart News, the site formerly run by Trump's chief strategist, his current chief strategist, Steve Bannon. Well, that piece doesn't say it either, as far as I recollect. This is a fabrication by the Associated Press. It is a flat-out lie. And I sent the clown reporter, what's his name, Jonathan Lemire, Lemire. I sent him his own quote out of this article, and I said, are you going to correct this? And I haven't heard a word. Because they have their narratives. They have their narratives about Trump. They have their narratives about the campaign. They have their narratives about talk radio. They have their narratives about me and the conservative movement. They are the Praetorian Guard, and they are going to protect themselves. They will do anything possible to protect the New York Times and its sloppy, outlandish, result-oriented crap. CNN is another perfect example. All of a sudden, well, we don't have to FISA warrants or anything. Well, why didn't you mention it at the time? Why didn't you mention it at the time? And then I asked on Thursday for Congress to get into this and get to the bottom of this. Put an end to this. It's one or the other. It's one or the other. And however this turns out, whether there is evidence of misconduct with an agency or department in the use of that information, well, we know there was misuse of the information. We know there were felonies committed in that regard. Or whether there's nothing. The media lose either way. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's another phony controversy brewing tonight. CNN is burping all over themselves on this, among others. And that is Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General of the United States, giving the pink slip to 46 Obama-appointed United States attorneys who are holdovers, which, of course, is par for the course, except if you're a Republican administration. These were Obama's presidential appointees. I don't care what their backgrounds are, whether they're political hacks, civil servants, whatever it is. A president has an absolute right to have senior positions filled by people who he can rely on or people who he believes shares his policy objectives. Andy McCarthy, writing at National Review not too long ago, and he points out in March 1993, Janet Reno began her tenure as President Bill Clinton's Attorney General by summarily firing United States attorneys for 93 of the 94 federal districts. That's more than twice as many as Trump Attorney General Jeff Sessions fired today. Indeed, there were only 46 Obama-appointed U.S. attorneys left for Sessions to relieve because Obama appointees fully understood that this is the way things work. Many of them had already moved on in the expectation that the president-elect in November would replace them, an expectation that became a virtual certainty once it was clear that this change of administrations would be a change of parties and visions. It's frequently observed that to be legitimate, law enforcement must operate independently of politics. It's an oversimplification, coupled with a misunderstanding of politics in its non-pejorative sense. Of course the conduct of investigations, prosecutions, and their consequent judicial proceedings must be immune from partisanship. It would be intolerable for people to be targeted for or insulated from criminal law enforcement based on their political connections. Law enforcement, however, is about more than handling individual cases. It's about making overarching policy choices. Resources are finite. Administrations must choose how many assets to dedicate to counterterrorism, to immigration enforcement, healthcare fraud, organized crime, and so on. Should the feds focus on the importation of illegal narcotics and their distribution by interstate criminal syndicates? Or should prosecutors and agents team up with state agencies to tackle street-level trafficking? Are the civil rights laws an enforcement measure to protect fundamental liberties, or are they a social justice tool for transforming nationwide policing practices? These policy choices are the stuff of politics. They often weigh heavily in presidential campaigns and elections. Law and order issues intimately affect people's lives. When presidents make promises about them, they must expect to be held accountable. United States attorneys are the instruments through which the president exercises his policy directions. That's why they are political appointees, appointed by the president. They don't have power on their own. Under our Constitution, all executive power is reposed in the president alone. Every officer of the executive branch is thus a delegate. The United States attorney exercises the president's power and can be removed at the president's will. It is only natural that a president will want his power wielded by his own appointees, whom he trusts to carry out his policy program. And it thus follows that when there is a transition between administrations, that we see the world and the Justice Department's role in it as differently as the Obama and Trump administrations, there will be sweeping turnover carried out rapidly. And that's how it's supposed to be. Yes, it was not uncommon in the pre-Clinton era that new presidents permitted sitting U.S. attorneys to continue through the transition of administrations to the completion of their 4-year terms. But that's a bygone time. When the federal government was not nearly as expansive, the role of the federal law enforcement was far more modest, and litigation did not have as imposing a role in settling society's disputes. Nowadays, there's unprecedented policy consequence in the execution of federal law enforcement, as much in the civil as in the criminal arena. It matters more than ever that the president has his appointees, who are chosen because they support his policy preferences. If Donald Trump has determined that the immigration laws must be enforced, and has won an election with that as his signature issue, why would he retain the U.S. attorneys Barack Obama appointed, prosecutors plainly sympathetic to Obama's non-enforcement policies? Why would he keep in place Obama's Justice Department appointees when the first notable action taken by one of the highest-ranking ones, Acting Attorney General Sally Yates, was the insubordinate refusal to defend a lawfully issued executive order endorsed by the Justice Department's special legal office, the Office of Legal Counsel? Unavoidably, the partisan rancor of Washington factors in too. Sure, we old-line federal prosecutors, he writes, may yearn for the time when the party affiliation of the U.S. attorney seemed irrelevant, when there was a reverence for the mission and traditions of the Justice Department that transcended partisanship. But when Bill Clinton purged his 93 in 93, that altered expectations forever. Until then, few Americans even thought about U.S. attorneys unless they were enmeshed in some Justice Department matter. But ever since, each party reciprocally demands its patronage. Their guys out, our guys in. The left is better at this game, writes McCarthy. Thus, when President George W. Bush fired 8 United States attorneys, his own appointees, well into his second term, his own appointees, Democrats managed to turn it into a scandal. But this was mainly due to the ham-fisted way Attorney General Alberto Gonzales and the Bush White House handled the issue, trying to suggest that the terminations were related to poor performance rather than politics as usual. As night follows days, this induced the fired U.S. attorneys to defend themselves, and that gave Democrats the opening to claim the administration had misled Congress and suggested the terminations were sinister, somehow related to the obstruction of or failure to bring worthy investigation. Cost Gonzales's job. But as far as constitutional principle is concerned, it was much ado about nothing. If anything, the lesson it teaches is, if a president's going to remove U.S. attorneys, best to do it at the beginning of an administration when it is manifestly a matter of wholesale transition, not decisions related to individual cases. Once Bill Clinton set that precedent, there was nary a peep when Bush had replaced nearly all of Clinton appointees by the end of his first year. After taking office as Attorney General in 2009, Eric Holder explained that the newly elected Barack Obama would soon announce, quote, our first batch of U.S. attorneys, unquote, to supplant Bush incumbents. Elaborating, he matter-of-factly said, elections matter. It's our intention to have the U.S. attorneys that are selected by Obama in place as quickly as we can. The Bush appointees were replaced, not because they did a bad job, because that's what presidents now do. They have their own enforcement priorities, and they have every right, subject to Senate's advice and consent, to have their own U.S. attorneys executing those priorities. That is exactly what President Trump has done. It's also exactly what he should have done, says Andy McCarthy, and he's right. So now why is this a big issue all over CNN? CNN, I don't know if anybody has coined this, but we'll do it anyway, the crap news network. Why is this a big issue at all? These people at CNN, these other news outlets, they've been around a while. They know the history of the Justice Department and the replacement of United States attorneys. So why are they making a fuss about this? You know damn well why they're doing it. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Let me tell you about Tisha, who owed the IRS $14,000. She was in a mess of trouble, and the IRS was aggressively pursuing her. So Tisha called my friends at Optima Tax Relief. That was a smart move. The Optima team quickly protected her, stopped the threats, stopped the aggressive collection actions, and went to work solving her tax problem. Now, not only did Tisha end up not paying the IRS $14,000, Optima got her a $7,000 refund. Case closed. Now, of course, all outcomes are different. But if you owe the IRS back taxes or haven't filed in some time, you know they're coming. And don't even think about going it alone. I trust Optima to solve your tax problems. They're A-plus rated with the Better Business Bureau, and they have resolved over $500 million in tax debt. Your call and consultation are free, and confidential. So here's what I want you to do. It's tax time. They're sharpening their knives and their teeth. Call 800-499-6300. 800-499-6300. You need to protect yourself against the IRS. That's 800-499-6300. The great folks at Optima Tax Relief, and a wonderful sponsor to boot. Oh, they are. All right, it's Friday. It's Friday, which means absolutely nothing. But let me take some calls here. Carol, Las Vegas, Nevada, our great affiliate, KDWN. K-Dawn, go.
Hey, hi, Mark. Thank you so much for exposing the fake news media for what it is. I mean, they collude with Congress. The Democrat Congress members repeat the same things they say. I don't really know who starts the story and shapes it, but they work together. And it's really sad because it's just one big joke.
They share the same view of the world. They are progressives, or I call them utopian statists, and that's who they are. We are the reptile house at the zoo.
Yeah.
That's what we are to them.
The propaganda arm of the Democrat Party, and it's just really sad because then they are on Congress in their hearings doing all their show. It's all a big show, and it's a big joke, but the joke's on the American people. They're wasting our money. They're not doing what they're supposed to do, and it's just really, really frustrating. So I'm so glad that you're exposing them for what they are.
Well, you do have one lucky thing. You're in or around Las Vegas. You can go into one of the casinos and play blackjack, get some nice big shrimp and cocktail sauce, have a good time. That's what I like to do.
It'd be great if I could win, too.
Yeah, well, you got to put a limit. So either way you win, whether you lose or otherwise. Carol, thank you for your call. Much appreciated. Deidre, Naples, Florida, the great WSFX. Go.
I think what we're seeing in the mainstream media today is classic KGB-type disinformation. It's a campaign that's meant to cause confusion and division and destroy reputations. And it's not about proving these allegations. It's about planting the seeds of doubt and distrust to destroy people's faith in our institutions. And it's un-American. It's anti-American. And, in fact, the media is acting more like KGB operatives than Trump's people are. That's my opinion.
Well, I wouldn't say KGB, but it is a progressive mentality. Yeah. And, I don't know how much to discuss right now, but thank you for your call, Deidre. Just remember the name of my new book, Rediscovering Americanism and the Tyranny of Progressivism. And I will be addressing, and I do address, the media, education, all these things. And I'm going to introduce you to some brand new people, philosophers, intellectuals on the left, people who've had an enormous impact on your life, and they had an enormous impact on your life. You just didn't know it 100 years ago, 80 years ago, and so forth. This is a battle of the philosophy of freedom as understood by the founders and the framers, and the philosophy of centralized government and egalitarianism, which is the progressive mindset. And I've just completed a book that I can assure you none of my detractors will read. None of these people in the media will read it. They don't give a damn. They're extremely superficial. They're poorly read. They know very little about the founding of this country, less about the Constitution, while they wave around certain aspects of it. So I can't wait till July 4th, Independence Day, and we will get into this in a big time. I don't believe the book's up on Amazon yet, so it might be this weekend or Tuesday or whatever. But I literally just finished writing it, what was it, yesterday or the day before? And now I get into the editing process. It's a lot of work. You got people on TV and radio who claim to write book after book after book after book. I'd like to put them in a lie detector device and see just how much of their books they actually write. It's easy to get on the air and claim such. Maybe they'll show us the books that they have used to do their research. Maybe they'll show. Maybe they don't use books. Maybe they're just such geniuses. They write down every brain burp, if you will, that they have. There are those. I'm not writing any more books. All of a sudden, 2 more pop out. It's amazing. Amazing how efficient they are. You just got to wonder. I'd love to be interviewed by them and ask them directly, because I happen to know some of them are frauds. People have contacted me, but I'm not allowed to get into it because I don't want to expose them. Mike, Long Island, New York, the great WABC. Go.
Hi. Thank you again for everything you do and point out. I'm a veteran, and the media is worse than when I was in Vietnam and after I came back. They are totally horrendous. One of the things a number of the veterans here on Long Island are doing is we are going into the public schools at the invitation of some of the public schools to talk to the students to correct the textbooks that are grossly incorrect. And I can't tell you how great that is. For the kids write us letters. Mm-hmm. The kids follow up on it, and we basically explain to them that freedom is not free. Mm-hmm. And these kids understand what we're talking about. They ask questions. In one of the middle schools here, on May 24th, we're going to be talking to 100 8th graders, and they closed the library and put up small tables, and they put 6 to 8 kids at a table, 1 or 2 veterans at a table, and then after 10 minutes, they kind of blow a whistle, and the kids move from table to table. So every veteran gets to talk to
Wow, how
every
did you
kid.
get into that public school?
I'm sorry?
How did you guys get into these public schools? I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful this was occurring all over the country?
It's interesting you should make that statement, because the principal, and this is a New York City public school, the principal brings us in there for Flag Day. It's a pre-K to 5 school.
15 seconds.
500 kids when they exchange the color guards for the Flag Day from the 5th graders.
All right, sir, I got to go. I apologize, but it sounds fascinating. It'd be wonderful if we can get vets into all these schools. I think that's a movement that you ought to lead. I really do, you and your folks. I'll be right back. But in May, mid to late May, I'm going to Israel with my family. And I'm going to broadcast for 3 days from Israel. Now, when I broadcast 3 days from Israel, obviously Eastern Time it's 6 to 9 p.m. here. It's midnight to 3 a.m. there. But I am going to do it live. We're going to line up some magnificent guests. And we'll be in Jerusalem and a number of other places. So I'm very excited about it. I've never been there. And I'm almost 60 years old. And I'm going to make it very enjoyable for you when you're listening. So there's a lot going on this summer. That, the book Rediscovering Americanism comes out on Independence Day on July 4th. I'm going to visit some cities. I haven't mentioned them yet, but I'll talk to the Reagan Library. We'll try and work that out. I already spoke too much, so we will figure that out, and I will let you know. But plenty of time. You know, folks, I bet those bags and puffiness under your eyes are still not going away. So many of you are asking Chamonix for a great deal on Genucel. So Genucel is back with a great discount. Genucel is a luxurious treatment with plant stem cells and anti-aging peptides targeting puffiness and bags under the eyes. But something new is waiting for you when you order Genucel right now. Listen to this. A $50 instant coupon for additional savings on your order. Genucel will also give you Esotique. Genucel's, that is Chamonix's anti-aging collagen builder. And for results in 12 hours or less, you'll also get Genucel Immediate Effects as a second free gift. So with this deal and today's $50 instant coupon, you can indulge in a 2-month supply of 3 amazing Chamonix products for much less than department or drugstore brands that don't even work. Call 800-SKIN-604, 800-SKIN-604, or go to Genucel.com right now. That's 800-SKIN-604. Order Genucel, get 2 free gifts, and the $50 instant coupon while supplies last. Let me tell you something about this product. My mother uses it. A buddy of mine who is a top cardiologist, Teddy, he uses it. I don't want to go through the family members. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think 5 of them use it. 5 of them. And they can't get enough of it. And every time I talk about it on the radio, they say, I wonder if the listeners understand what great products these are. And I try to convey it. I'm telling you the truth about this. So call 800-SKIN-604, 800-SKIN-604. They got a lot of free stuff there, and the $50 coupon. It's all worth it. Or go to Genucel.com. But the easiest, most direct way, if you're in your car, if you're home, wherever you are, just grab your phone. Right now, they're there. 800-SKIN-604. That's 800-SKIN-604. James, Detroit, Michigan, on the Mark Levin app. How are you, sir?
Mark, you kicked the hornet's nest Thursday night of last week. Obama, old holdovers, brought out their wordsmiths with Clapper and his preset questions. When they asked him the question, do you know of any FISA grants to investigate Trump? He clearly said, I know none of that, because, as you said, the second one, if they do exist, was narrowed to specifically go after possibly servers, other individuals, but not Donald Trump. This is an Obama great trick, and they've taught them all very well to do this wordsmithing of only answering a question kind of part way. Like he said, when no one is listening to your phone calls, what he really was saying was, of course, the truth, because it's a machine. It's a computer. It looks for the algorithms of words.
Why don't we just get to the bottom of this? Do you think Congress is going to get to the bottom of this?
Well, it seems like there's not going to be the effort, because now they've kind of backtracked. You've seen what's happened. They're attacking you.
Now they've taken the other side. It's like playing baseball, and all of a sudden they say, wait a minute, we're losing. And they jump on the other side.
Well, this is, the attention span of the American and most citizens of countries today is a very short span with our electronic age. And they're relying on this 30 paragraphs in truth. There's no evidence, but the narrative comes out in the first headline and the first paragraph, and this is what they run with.
That's so true.
All of the press. I mean, when you look for a story of any kind today on the web, they've all copied the same 4 paragraphs. There is no original reporting. This yellow journalism is at a massive pace, and it's the doctrine.
Let me ask you this question, too. I worked in the Reagan administration. I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. I wear my opinions day in and day out on my sleeve. Everybody knows where I stand. So many of these people are utterly dishonest and contemptible. Many of them are former Democrat operatives. Many of them have worked for Democrat members of the Hill, Democrat presidents. They know what they are. And yet they sit there and they pretend. I think it was called Inside Politics. So don't hold me to that, because I don't know all the names of the CNN shows. And before I was taping Levin TV, I'm watching this round table with this Dana Bash and the others. And they're going on and on. It's like a gaggle of liberals at a Democrat Party meeting. And they're trashing Trump, and they're laughing about Trump, and they're trashing the Republicans, and they're laughing about the Republicans. And I'm going, oh, my God, what is with these people? Look at this. No wonder their ratings suck. No wonder they have an approval rating in the toilet. Because they are what they are.
They're defending their way of life, and their way of life is who's paying them to say what they say. There's probably not going to be much action because, of course, the Republican insiders didn't support Trump. They're not his people.
Well, they should worry about the country. And my view is, let's let the chips fall where they may. Was there, as the media suggested, this massive investigation with intercepts of the Russians that caught this guy and FISA courts and all the rest. That's the jumble that they created. That's the jumble that they try to unravel now. Was there all of that? The extent to which the White House was involved? We already know the White House had some role. I mean, for crying out loud, the New York Times is reporting about it. And Jake Tapper, he's taking this chunk and this chunk and this chunk and putting it there. Don't be a moron, Jake. I'm reading what people are saying and writing. You ought to try it every now and then. Now, if that's not the case, and there's absolutely nothing, which I think is the case now because they're running in the absolute opposite direction, then they're frauds either way, are they not?
Well, whether it's true or not, like you said, it is dangerous play, because if they investigate and bring it out in the open, which is what should be done, then, of course, the guilty will be in the spotlight. But if it's all trumped up, pardon the pun, it is then even worse, because then whose agenda is this, and why is it being totally the talking points of the day? But it's their attack. My friend. They're all fighting for their place.
All right. Appreciate your call. Now, Mr. Producer, my computer just froze up. Who should I speak to? Sal on the Mark Levin app in Tennessee. How are you, sir?
Good, sir. How are you?
All right, sir. Thank you.
Just wanted to answer your question to the best of my ability. You asked earlier why the Democrats or CNN would make a big deal about these firings of the U.S. attorneys. I think the answer is because it worked for them before. When Bush did it, there was a big brouhaha by the Democrats and a bunch of hand-wringing by the Republicans. And if I remember correctly, Alberto Gonzalez ended up resigning over it.
And they fired 8 of their own appointed U.S. attorneys. And that's right, Chuck Schumer led the charge. I mean, let's think about this a second. We just had an election. These are presidential appointees. They're political appointees. They still have to go through the Senate. It requires confirmation, the advice and consent. Why is it controversial that when a president of the United States wants to replace people that Obama appointed with his own appointees? It just shows you how nuts these people are.
Well, I mean, I think it's a phony controversy, but it brings up a pet peeve of mine, which I think too many in the conservative media, and certainly you're not one of them, but too many help the liberal media set the agenda, the national discussion, by complaining about the liberal media. You know, we shouldn't even be talking about this because it's
you can't ignore it, because if we don't push back, nobody's available to push back. So you can't ignore it and pretend it won't be there. But I get your point. That is that they create this fake reality. And I've talked about this many times, and we spend all this time responding to it. Well, there are times when you really got to punch them back. And then there's other times when you want to, advance your own agenda or talk about things that matter otherwise. So it really is a balancing act. But excellent. By the way, you say you're from Tennessee. Why do you sound like you're from New England?
Oh, I was born in Boston.
Boston? Yeah. Well,
yeah.
How's that go over in Tennessee?
Oh, so this is the greatest place in the world, East Tennessee.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
You know, people are beautiful. The mountains are beautiful. The weather's
all right. Well, I appreciate your call. I really do. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You never think, boy, I'm lucky my car broke down. Well, you are lucky if it happens during the manufacturer's warranty and the repairs are covered. What happens after the warranty expires? Don't get stuck paying thousands of dollars for a major repair. Get extended coverage like I did for our Camaro from CarShield.com. A new engine or new transmission, that can cost you over $5,000. Even a simple repair to a sensor can cost over $1,000. CarShield makes the whole process easy. You select your favorite mechanic or get the work done at the dealership. There's no checks in the mail stuff or waiting for a reimbursement. CarShield gets the mechanic paid directly. CarShield's administrators even provide 24/7 roadside assistance and a rental car while yours is in the shop. This is the service, ladies and gentlemen. If your car is 3 to 12 years old, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. don't pay the higher repair bills. It doesn't mean you have to pay the higher repair bills. Get the ultimate protection against repair costs before it's too late. Here's what you do. Call 800-587-7090. Mention code Levin. Or visit carshield.com. Carshield.com. Use code Levin. That's Levin. You'll save 10% either way. 800-587-7090. Code Levin. Or carshield.com. Code Levin. I strongly encourage you to check it out. All right. Do we have time for a call, Richie Rich? I think we do. Zach, Pittsburgh, PA. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate it. What I wanted to make and get your take on is that, I'll even see officials in the Trump administration, and they'll say, well, we're doing X, and, keep in mind that the Obama administration or the Clinton administration, did something similar as well. Well, what I don't understand is why can't we just say, hey, there's a new sheriff in town, this is what it is, period. I don't understand why the justification, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but these guys are under attack from every quarter, quite frankly. So they're having to duke it out, and I give them a little bit of slack on that front. I really would. I mean, so far they've taken out Flynn. They forced Sessions, or at least you suggest that, to recuse in some respects. They've gone after Kellyanne Conway. Let's see, who else? So they're trying to pick them off one by one. And really, it was the attack on Sessions last week that really caused me to step it up and to get into gear here. Because it's obvious that if the liberal media had its way, it would pick off more of these people. You had the Democrats talking about impeachment, even though they don't control the House, but that's their goal. They're seeking to criminalize policy differences. They keep demanding special prosecutors. I told you all this would happen the day after the election. So I give these guys a little bit of slack. I really do. And a lot of them are kind of green. And so these things happen. And they're up against it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, every Friday, in your honor, my beloved Levinites, Ray Charles in America. Here we go. The week is officially over. The weekend begins right now. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel. Good night, Pepsi. Good night, Griffey. Good night, Spritey. Good night, Smokey. And good night, Zelda. Get Al-Qaeda. Get the Taliban. Get ISIS. Get all those cockroaches. And I'll see you on Levin TV in 2 minutes. Have a wonderful week, and God bless you all.